I emptied my savings to buy a rundown gas station abandoned since the 1980s. The day I signed the contract, my parents called me a fool. My brother laughed. "You're a hopeless failure." But just 1 week later, what I uncovered in the storage room behind the convenience store left them all speechless. Hello, my name is Caleb Hayes, 32 years old, was born in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Las Vegas, where every corner of the house exuded opulence. My father, Robert Hayes, is a tough man with a piercing gaze and a voice that could make anyone tremble. He is the chairman of Hayes Enterprises, a business empire that owns a string of hotels and casinos stretching across Nevada. My mother, Helen, is a refined woman, always appearing in expensive dresses with a perfect smile. But deep in her eyes, I've always sensed disappointment whenever she looks at me. Then there are Ethan and Chloe, my younger siblings, the prized gems of the family, always cherished and trusted by our parents. Ethan, 28, is a talented lawyer with a confident smile and sharp wit in every word he speaks. Chloe, 26, is a renowned interior designer with major contracts from 5-star hotels. And me, I'm Caleb, the one who graduated from a prestigious business school but has never amounted to anything worthwhile. From a young age I felt the weight of expectations pressing down on me. As the eldest, I was expected to take over my father's empire to become a better version of him. During tense family dinners, my father would often say to me, "Caleb, you are the future of the Hayes family. Don't let me down." But every time I heard those words I felt my heart tighten. I didn't want to be just a shadow of my father. I wanted to create something of my own, a unique mark, something people would remember when they heard the name Caleb Hayes, not just Robert Hayes' son. I tried, I really did. In college, I was an outstanding student, always at the top of my class. I dreamed of building my own business independent of the Hayes name. After graduating, I dove into startup ventures with all the passion of youth. First, there was a small coffee shop in downtown Las Vegas, with the idea of combining an artistic space with live music. I spent months designing the menu, choosing furniture, even painting the walls myself. But the shop lasted only 6 months before shutting down due to a lack of customers. Then I tried my hand at a tech app, a platform to connect street artists with tourists. I poured thousands of dollars into it only to realize the market wasn't ready for my idea. Next came a high-end fashion boutique where I hoped to bring unique designs to life. But once again I failed. Customers didn't show up and I lost nearly all my savings. With each failure, I faced mockery from my family. My father never said it outright, but his eyes, those cold, disappointed eyes, said it all. My mother was gentler, but her words like, "Caleb, why don't you try working for your father's company? It would be easier," made me feel like a child who couldn't stand on his own. Ethan and Chloe treated me even worse. During family gatherings, Ethan would tease, "Caleb, what's the next big thing you're opening? A bakery, maybe?" Chloe would playfully add, "Or that artsy cafe you wanted to open. I wonder how long this one will last." They said these things as if they were just jokes, but I knew deep down they truly believed I was a failure. I don't entirely blame them. I understand why they think that way. While Ethan and Chloe always succeeded, Ethan with his high-profile lawsuits, Chloe with her designs praised in the press, I was just the clumsy older brother, always failing at his grand dreams. But that doesn't mean their words didn't hurt. Every comment, every disappointed look chipped away at my self-esteem. Some nights I'd lie in bed in my small rented apartment on the outskirts, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I really was as useless as they said. Was I born just to be a backdrop for other people's success? But deep down, I still believe I can do something meaningful. I don't want to be just an employee in my father's company living in his shadow. I want to stand on my own to prove I'm not the failure they think I am. I want them to look at me and admit they were wrong. Maybe it's arrogance, maybe it's stubbornness, but it's the only flame that keeps me moving forward even when everything seems to be falling apart. My apartment is a modest place far from the extravagance of the family mansion. It has a small bedroom, a cramped kitchen, and an old second-hand sofa I bought from a thrift store. But it's where I feel free, where I can be myself without being compared to Ethan or Chloe. I often sit by the window looking out at the twinkling lights of Las Vegas, dreaming of the day I'll create something that makes this city turn its head. But every time I start a new project, the fear of failure creeps in, whispering in my ear, "You'll fail again, Caleb. You're not good enough." I've thought about giving up. I really have. Once after my tech app failed, I sat in my small office staring at the red loss figures on my computer screen, thinking maybe my parents were right. Maybe I should give up my dreams, take a job at my father's company, and live a safe, predictable life. But every time that thought creeps in, a part of me screams in protest. I don't want to live a life I don't believe in. I want to rise on my own, no matter how hard the path may be. My family wasn't always cold. There were moments when I was younger, when I felt their love. I remember evenings, when my father took me to baseball games, just the two of us, and he'd tell me about the early days of building Hayes Enterprises from nothing. My mother used to sit with me reading fairy tales, telling me I could be anything I want. But as I grew older and the failures piled up, that warmth faded, replaced by heavy expectations and sharp criticism. Las Vegas, with all its glamour, is a strange place to grow up. This city is full of people chasing dreams, but it's also full of broken ones. I've seen people come here hoping to change their lives, only to leave empty-handed. I don't want to be one of them, but with every failure, I feel myself inching closer to that fate. Then came a fateful day when a call from Marco changed everything. Marco called one late afternoon, while I was sitting on my worn-out sofa, staring at an unpaid electric bill. His voice on the phone was brimming with excitement as if he just struck gold. "Caleb, I've got something for you," he said, his words quick and urgent. "A real opportunity. You want to hear it?" I sighed, responding lazily. "Marco, if this is another crazy idea like opening a mobile taco stand, I'm out." I was all too familiar with Marco's pipe dreams, which usually ended with him pocketing a fat commission while I lost money. No, this is different." Marco laughed loudly. "I'm talking about real estate, an old gas station on the outskirts near Route 95. Dirt cheap, only $20,000. Can you believe it? A real steal." I sat up straighter, not exactly excited, but curious. "A gas station in the middle of nowhere, Marco. Who buys an abandoned gas station in a place even coyotes don't bother visiting?" "That's the point, Caleb," Marco said, his voice as smooth as a seasoned salesman's. "The state's planning to build a new highway right through that area, and I got a tip from an inside source. A big real estate conglomerate is eyeing the place. They're planning to build a resort, maybe even a shopping center. That gas station will be right in the middle of it all. You buy it now, fix it up a bit, and sell it for 10 times the price, or run it yourself and turn it into a gold mine." I went silent for a moment, trying to process the information. Marco always had a way of making everything sound like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But I knew he wasn't entirely trustworthy. Marco was a broker, but not the kind of honest broker you'd want to work with. He was tall with slick back hair, a dazzling smile, and always wore cheap suits tailored to look more expensive than they were. "Marco, I don't have $20,000, I said, my voice weird. "My account's in the red, and I still owe this month's rent." "Then borrow it," Marco shot back as if it were obvious. "Caleb, you're a haze. Your family has money. Ask your parents or your siblings. This is your chance to prove you're not, well, you know what they say about you." I felt the blood rush to my face. Marco knew all about my family's mockery, and he wasn't above using it to push my buttons. "Don't bring my family into this," I snapped. "I'm not asking them for money. You know what they think of me." All right, Marco sued, but I could picture the smirk on his face. "But listen, Caleb, I'm doing this for you. I could sell this gas station to anyone, but I want you to have this opportunity. 20,000 is a bargain. I negotiated with the landowner to get it down to this price. They want to sell fast, and I'm holding it for you. But you've got to decide quickly or they'll sell to someone else." I closed my eyes trying to think. An abandoned gas station in the middle of nowhere sounded like a crazy idea, but Marco's talk of the highway and real estate projects made me waver. I'd failed so many times, and the thought of a chance to turn my life around to prove I wasn't a failure made my heart race. But $20,000, that was a fortune for me at the time. "Let me think about it." "No time, Caleb," Marco replied, his voice growing more urgent. "I'm serious. There's someone else asking about it. I'm only prioritizing you because we're friends. You've got 48 hours. Just call me back when you decide." "Okay." The call ended, and I sat there staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call back immediately and say no, but another part, the part desperate to prove itself, couldn't stop thinking about the possibility. A gas station, an opportunity, a chance to stand tall in front of my family and say I did it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, my mind swirling with numbers and possibilities. I didn't have $20,000, but I could borrow it. I had a few wealthy friends who could lend me the money with a snap of their fingers. But what made me hesitate most wasn't the money. It was Marco. I knew he was a smooth talker, and his words were hard to fully trust. The next morning, I decided to check out the gas station. Marco met me at a small cafe before taking me to the site. When I walked in, he was already there, dressed in a gray suit, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. "Caleb, you made it," he grinned, standing to slap my shoulder. "I knew you wouldn't pass this up." On the drive to the gas station, Marco wouldn't stop talking. He went on about the highway, the investors pouring money into the area, how this gas station would be a diamond in the rough that I could turn into gold. But when we arrived, my heart sank. The gas station sat on a dusty road far from downtown Las Vegas. It looked like a ruin. The pumps were rusted. The convenience store's windows were shattered, and the roof looked like it would collapse with a strong gust of wind. Weeds grew wild around it, and an old sign reading Desert Star hung precariously, its letters nearly faded. This wasn't a diamond in the rough, it was a pile of junk. "Marco, are you kidding me?" I turned to him, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is where—" Marco laughed, but I noticed his eyes dart away. "Caleb, you've got to see the bigger picture. Don't you see the potential? When the highway opens, this place will be the center of everything. You just need to invest a little to fix it up and you'll have a gold mine." "Marco, be honest," I pressed. "Are you sure this is a steal, or are you just trying to make a commission?" He clutched his chest, feigning offense. "Caleb, you think I'm that kind of guy? I'm your friend. I'm doing this for you. 20,000 is the price I negotiated down from 30,000. The landowner wants to sell fast, and I fought to keep this price for you." I wanted to believe him, but something felt off. The way he spoke too quickly, the way he avoided my eyes, it all made me uneasy. But then I thought of my family, their mockery, my father's disappointed gaze. I thought of all the times I'd failed, and this opportunity, however crazy, might be the gamble that let me win big and prove myself. It took me 2 days to scrape together the money. I borrowed from an old friend, promising to pay him back soon. I also took out a loan against my apartment. Finally, I had the $20,000. I called Marco and told him I'd buy. Awesome, Marco cheered over the phone. You won't regret this, Caleb. This is your turning point. The sale went through quickly. Marco took me to a real estate lawyer's office where the lawyer seemed rushed and asked few questions. I signed the papers, handed over the money, and received the keys to the gas station. As I held them in my hand, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. This was the first time I owned something entirely my own, but the joy didn't last. When I told my family about my decision during a rare family dinner I was forced to attend, their reactions were exactly as I expected. My father let out a hoarse mocking laugh. An abandoned gas station. Caleb, are you serious? What have you thrown your money into this time? My mother tried to be gentler, but her voice betrayed her disappointment. Caleb, you should work for your father's company. Why do you keep chasing these foolish ideas? Ethan, as usual, didn't miss his chance. Caleb, I have a feeling that gas station will be another one of your failed projects. Maybe you should call it Caleb's Folly. Chloe giggled, adding, I'll design a sign for you free of charge. I sat there gripping my fork and knife tightly, trying to suppress my anger. I wanted to shout that I'd prove them wrong. But I stayed silent, holding back my frustration, and told myself I would succeed. A few days later, I drove out to the gas station carrying a toolbox and a sliver of hope. As I stepped into the convenience store, the smell of dust and mildew hit me. I looked around at the empty shelves, the cracks in the walls, and a creeping sense of doubt began to take hold. I paid $20,000 for this. I started to wonder if Marco had been honest about its value. Weeks later, I discovered the bitter truth. A contact in the real estate business happened to mention the property's history, revealing it had recently been listed for only $3,000. I froze. $3,000. It became clear that Marco had significantly misrepresented the situation. The negotiation he spoke of was a story he created. The price had been inflated, and he had taken advantage of my trust. The friend I thought was helping me had simply misled me for his own gain. I stood in the Desert Star convenience store gripping my phone tightly. I dialed Marco's number. It rang, then went straight to voicemail. I tried a few more times, each unanswered ring like a knife twisting deeper into my pride. Marco didn't pick up. He had vanished like a ghost in the Nevada desert, leaving me with this wreck and a heart full of wounds. I slumped into an old chair in the convenience store, my mind reeling. The smell of dust and old motor oil filled my nose, a reminder that I was stuck with this gas station. A pile of junk I'd paid multiples over its worth for. I wondered how foolish I'd been to trust Mark. He'd hit my weak spot, my desperation to prove myself, my fear of my family's scorn. He knew how badly I wanted a chance, and he used it against me. I thought of the times he laughed, slapped my shoulder, called me buddy. It was all an act. I'd let him manipulate me like a puppet, and now I was paying the price. I looked out through the broken window, considering giving up. I could sell this place for whatever I could get, return to Las Vegas, and beg for a job at my father's company. At least I wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. But then I thought of my father's gaze, Ethan's mocking smile, Chloe's giggles. If I gave up now, they'd have a reason to laugh at me forever. I'd have no shred of dignity left. I stood up, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and looked around the wreckage. Even if Marco had misled me, even if I'd made a mistake, I knew I couldn't stop. Desert Star was my last chance, and I had to fight to the end. The days that followed were a grueling string of hard labor. I started by cleaning the convenience store, where dust and cobwebs had claimed every corner. The empty shelves coated in a thick layer of grime looked like relics of a bygone era. I brought an old broom, a bucket of water, and some cheap cleaning supplies from a nearby store. I scrubbed the floors, wiped down the remaining broken glass panes, and tried to patch the leaking roof with some makeshift metal sheets. Every sweep of the broom, every drop of sweat that hit the floor, felt like a declaration of war against the doubts gnawing at me. The Desert Star gas station, true to its name, stood alone in the Nevada desert. Route 95, which ran alongside it, was desolate, with only the occasional truck roaring by, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. I began to question whether Marco had been honest about the highway. The thought that I'd been deceived, not just about the price, but about the land's potential, sent shivers down my spine. But every time doubt crept in, I told myself, you've come this far, Caleb. You can't turn back. I focused on fixing things bit by bit. The gas pumps were completely broken, their pipes rusted beyond repair. I didn't have the money to replace them, so I bought some used parts from a nearby junkyard, and taught myself how to fix them through online videos. I'd never been a mechanic, but I learned fast. Some days I worked from early morning until midnight, my hands and arms covered in scratches and motor oil. But I didn't. Every time I got something working, a pump humming back to life, a light bulb flickering on in the store, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of the self-respect I'd lost. Then one afternoon, while I was wrestling with a leaking water pipe under the store's floor, everything changed. That pipe had been driving me crazy for a week. Water kept seeping out, flooding a corner of the floor, and I couldn't afford to call a plumber. I decided to tackle it myself despite knowing nothing about plumbing. Armed with a wrench and a small shovel, I started digging up the floor. The old cracked concrete floor took effort to break apart, and I had to use all my strength to chip away at it. Sweat streamed down my face. Dust clung to my clothes, but I didn't stop. I needed to fix that troublesome pipe or the whole store would turn into a swamp. After hours of digging, I heard an odd sound, not the crack of concrete, but a sharp clank like I'd hit something solid. I stopped panting, and looked down. Beneath the broken concrete, I saw a wooden panel, old and darkened, unlike the rest of the floor. It looked like a small trapdoor embedded in the foundation. My heart raced. What was this? A trapdoor, a secret storage space, or just a useless piece of wood forgotten under the floor? I knelt down, brushing away the dust and debris with my hand. The wood was secured with rusted nails, loosened by years of neglect. I grabbed my wrench and pried them out one by one, my heart pounding like it was trying to leap out of my chest. When I lifted the final piece of wood, I saw a dark void below, a passageway deep and cold, leading into darkness. A damp breeze carrying the scent of old wood and something like aged wine hit my face. I turned on my phone's flashlight, its weak beam illuminating a rickety wooden staircase that looked like it would collapse under the slightest touch. I stood there hesitating. Part of me wanted to cover the panel back up, finish fixing the pipe, and forget about this. But another part, the curious part, the part hungry for something unexpected, urged me to go down. The stairs creaked under each step, and I clung to the wooden railing to keep from falling. When I reached the bottom, I raised my flashlight, and what I saw stopped me in my tracks. The cellar wasn't large, maybe 200 square feet, but it was packed with wooden crates and old iron shelves, lined with hundreds of wine bottles covered in dust and cobweb. Some bottles lay horizontally on the shelves. Others were stacked in large wooden crates, as if someone had carefully stored them here and then forgotten them. The labels on the bottles were faded, but I could still make out a few. The smudged old-fashioned ink hinted at names that carried an air of prestige. Chateau Petrou, Dom Perrin, Lafite Rothschild. My heart pounded faster as the flashlight beam swept over the bottles, each one placed with care like a treasure. This cellar wasn't a storage room for junk. It was a forgotten vault of riches buried under the dust of time. I moved slowly as if afraid that a single abrupt movement could shatter something precious. I knelt down, picked up a bottle, and carefully wiped the dust off its label. Under the faint glow of my flashlight, I saw the word Chateau Petrou 1921. I wasn't a wine expert, but I knew enough to understand this wasn't ordinary wine. I set the bottle down, trembling. What was this? How could a stash of wine like this be hidden under the floor of an abandoned gas station in the middle of the Nevada desert? I swept my flashlight across the cellar, roughly counting hundreds of bottles, not to mention the large wooden crates stacked in the corner. Some crates had carved inscriptions, but I couldn't make them out in the dim light. I felt like I'd stumbled into a mystery, a story buried long ago. I sat down on the cellar floor, trying to organize my thoughts. This gas station had been abandoned for decades, long before I was misled into buying it. Perhaps it had been forgotten since an era of strict regulations in the 1920s, when certain goods were controlled. I'd read about that time. People went to great lengths to store valuable goods in secret, hiding them in underground cellars to keep them safe. Could this be one of those forgotten collections? A place where someone hid these premium wines only to never return for some reason. I stood up, determined to investigate further. I pulled out a wooden crate, hearing the wood creak under its weight. Inside were more bottles, some still sealed with red wax, as if they'd been bottled yesterday. I picked up another bottle, this time a Domino labeled 1928. I'd heard my father talk about auctions in Las Vegas, where collectors paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single rare bottle. If each bottle in this cellar was worth that much, the entire stash could be worth tens of millions. But even as that thought sparked, a wave of doubt pulled me back to reality. I was Caleb Hayes, the one who always stumbled when opportunity came close. Was this just another illusion? Were these bottles truly valuable? Or were they just fakes, abandoned because they were worthless? I didn't know enough about wine to judge for myself, and the thought that I might be deluding myself sent a chill through me. But I couldn't dismiss the possibility. I climbed back up the stairs to the convenience store, and grabbed an old notebook from my tool bag. I started taking notes, counting the bottles and crates, and jotting down the labels I could read. My hand shook as I wrote, not from the cold, but from a mix of excitement and apprehension. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I needed someone knowledgeable to verify this. That night, I brought a few bottles back to my apartment, carefully placing them on the kitchen table as if they were precious gems. I opened my laptop and started researching vintage wines, the Prohibition era, and the value of bottles like Chateau Petrou and Dom Perrin. What I found made me almost unable to believe my eyes. A Chateau Petrou 1921 had sold for $150,000 at an auction in New York. A Dom Perrin in 1928, if intact, could easily fetch $80,000. And these weren't just one or two bottles. I had hundreds, maybe thousands in that cellar. If even a fraction of them were real, the stash could be worth tens of millions. I sat there staring at the computer screen, feeling like the world was spinning around me. This was the opportunity I'd waited for my entire life. An unimaginable marvel. But alongside the excitement, a new sense of unease crept in. Was I capable of capitalizing on this, or would I face setbacks again like every time before? I closed the laptop, stood up, and paced my cramped apartment. I needed a plan. I couldn't just take these bottles to an auction without knowing if they were real. I needed to find an expert, but how could I contact someone without revealing this secret? I'd learned my lesson from Marco. Blind trust could cost me everything. I decided to keep this quiet, at least until I knew what I was dealing with. The next morning, I returned to Desert Star with a completely different mindset. The cellar was no longer just a damp, dilapidated space. It was a potential treasure trove, a chance to change my life. I spent the entire day in the cellar, inspecting every bottle, every crate. Some bottles were broken, their contents long dried up, but most were intact, their red wax seals still firm. While examining a crate in the corner of the cellar, I found something else. A small notebook, its leather cover rotting, tucked between two crates. I carefully opened it, the yellowed fragile pages, threatening to tear. Inside were handwritten notes, detailing transactions, dates, quantities of bottles, and a list of recipients' names. I realized this gas station had likely been a hub in a bootlegging network long ago. I pictured men in long coats driving old trucks in the dead of night, hiding bottles under floorboards and stashing crates in this crumbling cellar. Desert Star wasn't just a gas station. It was a piece of history, a fragment of a chaotic and mysterious era. I decided to contact a wine expert, but would do so discreetly. I searched online and reached out to an auction house in Las Vegas that specialized in vintage wines. I didn't reveal details, only saying I had a few old bottles and wanted them appraised. The man on the phone, with a deep professional voice, agreed to meet me in a few days, but asked me to bring a few bottles to his office. I hesitated. Taking the bottles out of the cellar meant risking exposure, but I had no choice. I needed certainty. I selected 3 bottles, a Chateau Petrus 1921, a Dom Perrin 1928, and another with a handwritten label, carefully packing them in a small wooden box I found in the cellar. As I left the gas station, I felt like I was carrying something immensely valuable. Every time my car hit a pothole on Route 95, I flinched, concerned the bottles would be damaged. I drove slowly, eyes glued to the road, my heart pounding. The meeting with the wine expert took place on a Tuesday morning at an auction house office in downtown Las Vegas. I walked in, clutching the wooden box tightly, feeling as though every eye in the room was fixed on me. The man I met, Mr. Henry Caldwell, was a renowned wine expert, with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses. He had a sharp gaze, as if he could appraise an entire person with a single glance. I set the box on the table, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained that I had stumbled upon a few old bottles in a property I'd recently purchased. I didn't mention Desert Star or the cellar. I didn't want anyone to know too much. Not yet. Mr. Caldwell opened the box, carefully lifting each bottle, examining the labels and seals under the light. His face showed no emotion, but I noticed his hand tremble slightly as he held the Chateau Petrus 9. "You say you found these bottles in a property?" he asked, his voice low, but tinged with skepticism. I nodded, trying to maintain a neutral expression, though my heart was pounding like a drum.